So, where we last left off, I was asking what the ordinance violation or infraction was that Miss Bauer was supposedly violating when the officer asked her to ID herself. I got a response from the actual corporate counsel now. This is the city attorney for the city of Kokomo. Mr. Throgmorton, we have provided the report in response to your request. Just to be clear, the Kokomo Police Department first issues a report and then after makes recommendations to the prosecutor regarding the filing of criminal charges. The prosecutor, who acts under the state of Indiana, decides if and when to file those criminal charges. If you wish to review the city's code of ordinances, they can be found at the link below. So he basically just assumed that I'm, the average person here, and I was kind of going to give him this little spiel about how I already read pretty much the whole fucking city code. And then, basically with this little spiel is trying to pass the buck to the prosecutor. It's all the prosecutor. They act under the state of Indiana. We can't do anything about this, blah, 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 blah. So I went ahead and asked, "Good evening, Mr. Rethlake. As you may already know, per Indiana Code 342853, when a law enforcement officer believes in good faith that a person has committed an infraction or ordinance violation, the law enforcement officer may detain that person for a time sufficient to 1. Inform the person of the allegation, 2. Obtain the person's name and identity, and 3. Allow the person to execute a notice to appear." So, 342853.5, the section right after this is what refusal to identify for, after having been stopped for, this is why, is they have to take this information and fill out a notice to appear, a complaint and summons. There's a format. I discuss that here in a minute. Anyway, whether it's an infraction or an ordinance violation, it's the same format. It's the same complaint and summons under Indiana Code 9336. Anyway, so the police report, or the incident report, says that she was arrested for resisting law enforcement and civil procedure, refusal to identify self while stopped for infraction or ordinance. Now, this is on the police report. While stopped for an infraction or ordinance. That's what they're claiming. She refused to identify while she was already stopped for an infraction or ordinance. This is why they need your identity, is to fill out the complaint and summons. So, that being said, I assumed the officer was attempting to issue a complaint and summons, described in Indiana Code 9-30-3-6. 4. An action to enforce a statute defining an infraction in the name of the state of Indiana, or an action to enforce an ordinance in the name of the municipal corporation. Either way, she would get a complaint and summons. Something that has a date, time, to appear, to admit and deny that she's not presumed guilty of whatever the ordinance violation or the infraction is. So, she's supposed to go and have a little kangaroo court, and we pretend that it's a fair process, etc. Everybody knows how traffic court goes. It's the same thing. You're getting found guilty no matter what. Most people just go in there and pay the fine. But you have to have the illusion of due process at least, which they don't even have here. So I asked him, "Are you telling me that the Kokomo Police Department, City of Kokomo, has issued no such notice to Miss Bauer, even though she was arrested for allegedly refusing to identify herself for the complaint and summons that does not exist because she is not being formally accused of an infraction or ordinance violation? You guys aren't telling me that I'm being denied public records under some sort of exemption. You're telling me that no such record exists. So we'll see what he says back. I imagine this is going to leave him kind of stumped, because basically they messed up here. They did not do this procedurally correct, and now what has happened is, the prosecutor's office has her charged solely with resisting arrest. There's no ordinance violation that she's being accused of, so she can't really be found guilty of refusal to identify, which is why the prosecutor's office probably didn't call her, or charge her, I mean. But it's which is also why this dude tried to push me off to the prosecutor, because they're, obviously all working together. They're going to try to, make this turn into a guilty plea so they don't end up sued. But the reality is, she should have been, if they were accusing her of an ordinance violation or an infraction, she should have been issued a ticket. And this is what they need your identity for, is to fill out the ticket. If you refuse to provide them with the information that they need to fill out this ticket, that's the crime. Is you are basically interfering with their ability to issue you the ticket. This is what her supposed crime, is, but there's no ticket that they're claiming she refused to provide her identity for. You know what I mean? She's arrested for refusing to identify herself, but they weren't trying to get her to identify herself for a ticket. They just wanted to know who she was, which is why they didn't write her a ticket. This is why they kind of showed their hand here. If it was done for its true purposes and they were actually honoring the procedure, it'd be a completely different thing. But it was, this kind of makes it obvious, this big of a mistake here, that their purposes were solely to identify her for other reasons, such as wearing a dark clothing at night, being out at night, things that are not actually considered reasonable suspicion. So because they can't use all that, they come up with this ordinance violation, infraction, refusal to identify thing, but they don't have a ticket, which means they didn't actually need her to identify herself. So she didn't refuse to identify, in my opinion. And because of that, she wasn't under arrest for refusing to identify, meaning resisting an unlawful arrest at best. The most she did was resist an unlawful arrest. And here in Indiana, you can do that, actually. It's actually codified in our self-defense laws. Anyway, thanks for watching. Kokomo's at it again. They're trying to cover their bases, but they didn't do a very good job from the beginning, and this new city attorney is he's counting on the prosecutor's office to make it all look good. So let me know how it goes. Or I'll let you guys know how it goes. Sorry, got my sister sending me updates and whatnot.